Welcome back to Fox Eyes on the Hill Live this Sunday morning. President-elect Donald Trump is hosting Republicans at his Mar-a-Lago home in Florida this weekend to discuss his policy priorities. House Freedom Caucus members, committee chairs, and Republicans in blue states are meeting with Trump just 1 week before the presidential inauguration. Let's bring in our political panel this morning. Enda Curran is a global economics reporter with Bloomberg, and Byrnes returns as the senior editor with The Hill. So Joe Biden's this is his last full week in office. He is going to give a farewell address Wednesday night. And what do you think his legacy is going to be? And we learned this week in Jimmy Carter's funeral, legacy doesn't always become what you think it is when somebody leaves office.
Well, I think on the economy, obviously leaving a strong economy, as we saw with the employment data for the end of last year. There's plenty of work, people have a job. We know there's been plenty of foreign investment coming into the US. We know that there's been investment into critical areas like national security concerns, chip infrastructure, EVs and the like. So there's a good economy story, but we also know there's been a big sting in the tail, and that's been the cost of living. And of course, we saw that come out through the election results as well. It has been very tough on people over the past few years, and it would probably take a while for people to forget that, I think, when it comes to his legacy.
Yeah, I found myself in watching President Carter's funeral kind of swinging back and forth between, you know, the moment of what was going on inside the cathedral and the fact that, yes, we are about to end another presidency with Joe Biden. The Biden team over the last couple of weeks, Jesse, has been, you know, pushing press release after press release about these things that they've accomplished. But they don't get to write history.
No.
What ultimately do you think Biden leaves office with next Monday as far as what people immediately think of how these last 4 years went?
Politically, you know, passing the Inflation Reduction Act was a huge feat for the Biden team. But at the end of the day, many Democrats and most of the country are going to remember the fact that Biden was slow to get out of the 2024 race. He only gave Vice President Harris a couple of months to actually mount a credible campaign, and ultimately unsuccessful one. And then also leaving the White House within just a few weeks, pardoning his son, Hunter Biden, and at the same time undermining what Democrats have been saying for years in terms of Trump trying to undermine the Justice Department and go after people politically and put a spin on Justice Department investigations. And Biden essentially using that same argument, saying that the Justice Department was politicized to go after his son. That really hurts Democrats, and it really hurts Democrats at a time when now they're preparing for a second Trump term. And so I think the twin topics there are certainly going to really paint Biden's picture.
And it seems to have muted some of the response to the decision in the hush money case with Donald Trump, in that you have not heard Democrats coming out and railing about the fact that Trump was, you know, sentenced without any punishment, because very quickly they would have to answer the question about Hunter Biden being pardoned. And as you look at the beginning of this next Trump administration, do you expect a different Trump administration than the last one we saw, or are they going to pick up where they left off?
Well, there'll obviously be a continuation of a theme in terms of the certain policy focuses that the Trump administration will be expected to have, but that will still mean a reasonable amount of shock in terms of how business and government is done in the US, I think, over the next few years. Big change coming on trade policy, for example, promised changes on regulation on an energy policy, and a promised change to doing business with the rest of the world as well, in terms of, you know, there's got to be some quid pro quo in this. So I think a different approach to the Biden administration for sure.
Jesse, what we're seeing already, though, that even though Republicans have majorities in the Senate and in the House, this is not quite all for one for all. There have been rumblings in the Senate about some of these cabinet nominees, like Pete Hegseth and RFK Jr. There have also been back and forths in the House. The president wanted the continuing resolution to keep the government open to include a debt ceiling increase. That didn't happen. So is it necessarily a given that the relationship between the incoming Republican president and the Republican majority in Congress is going to be smooth sailing from the get-go?
It certainly is not. And when it comes to the nominations, we're going to see Rubio, we're going to see Pam Bondi for AG this week, some easy Doug Collins for VA, some easy nominees that are going to very likely be confirmed. But they're also leading with Pete Hegseth on Tuesday, who's one of the ones who's Republican senators still, he's made some progress with them, but he still hasn't won them over fully. So there's some hurdles on the confirmations fight. But one of the most consequential stories in Washington right now is this reconciliation bill. And a huge part of Trump's agenda is hanging in the balance between the House and Senate Republicans and not having an agreement on whether they're going to have one bill or two bills. And it threatens to have a repeat of 2017 when Trump first entered office. They talked about infrastructure, they talked about immigration, but they ended up spending most of the year focused on tax reform. They did get it done, but that was the single large, significant piece of legislation for Trump's entire term. And so a lot hinges on getting the strategy right for Republicans right now.
And one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about from Trump world since the election has been DOGE, this Department of Government Efficiency, which Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk together say they are going to not only move jobs out of Washington, D.C., but also reduce the amount of jobs as well. You cover the economy and the markets pretty much. How does Wall Street look at that? Because government efficiency is something in theory that people like, but reducing the size of the actual job force could actually maybe lead to some deficiencies in people's services that they're getting from the federal government.
Yeah, I think Wall Street is watching very closely the government spending, Tom. It's being considered it's on too high a trajectory, it's unsustainable, and plenty of official Washington say the government needs to rein in its spending too. But then to your point, where and how will those spending cuts be implemented? Now we get some big headlines around this DOGE initiative and promises to cut deeply, but that does mean cutting essential services, cutting people's jobs, and of course how to do that while also getting Congress to support it. So there might be some broad agreement over government spending needs to be reined in, but plenty of question marks over how DOGE can do that, I think.
Jesse, you think that's something that the Congress is going to seize on or be resistant to because you start cutting into people's own districts?
You're cutting into people's districts at the same time. Now you have some Republicans who are worrying about the deficit, and that's a huge issue that Trump doesn't want to have to deal with.
Jesse Byrnes from The Hill, Enda Curran from Bloomberg. We appreciate both of you joining us this morning. Enda's going